An off-season of reckoning begins a little bit early for the Ohio State Buckeyes. Sure, there's going to be a bowl game, a pretty good bowl game, one would bet, on the way, but there's going to be some changes on the way as well. As we welcome in Dan Hope from 11warriors.com. And Dan, before we get into perhaps some changes, let's go back to Saturday and an Ohio State team. This is not the team we saw against Purdue, not the team we saw against Michigan State, but it was very close to this team we saw against both Penn State and Nebraska, a team that struggled in the red zone, a team that struggled with penalties, and a team that perhaps for the first time in a long time was out-physicalized by their opponent.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Certainly, like you said, we had seen, some of the issues that we saw on the offense against, Penn State and Nebraska, where they struggled to finish drives in the red zone. They struggled to move the ball on the ground. But in this game, it was really both sides of the ball where we saw Michigan completely dominate the trenches on the ground, running for 297 yards and 6 touchdowns. We knew going into the game that that's what Michigan wanted to do. They're a team that they don't want to pass the ball a ton. They want to just run the ball at you, and they want to wear you down. And they had no shortage of success doing that. I mean, they were pretty much able to just keep running on the Buckeyes, and Ohio State had no answer to stop it. And then on the other side of the ball, I think Ohio State's offensive line, for the most part this year, had been great in pass protection, but going up against Aiden Hutchinson, who might be the best defensive player in the country, Hutchinson just had his way with that offensive line. I think Pro Football Focus said that he had 15 total quarterback pressures in that game. So Ohio State did not have an answer for him. In the entire defensive front, both in the pass game and the run game, was still able to get a lot of yards. But again, like we had seen in a couple of those other games, when it came down to needing to get those tough yards on the ground and needing to finish off drives, they weren't able to consistently do that. They had issues with penalties again and got off schedule, and you just add it all up, and it led to Ohio State losing this game by 2 scores.
I think another thing that needs to be said is this explosive Ohio State offense was slowed down to the point where they were almost taking too long to score. So when you got into that second half, particularly that fourth quarter, you could see that clock ticking down. They weren't getting those quick touchdowns. And even though Ohio State won the time of possession, Michigan really was able to dictate the pace of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, one of the things that people were talking about coming in is, Michigan struggles with tempo. Maybe if Ohio State can, turn it into a track meet kind of game, that's going to favor Ohio State. But it never turned out that way. And, I think going into the game, one of the things that I felt was, okay, if Ohio State can get out to a hot start, if they can get out to a good lead early, they're going to have a good chance to be able to pull away and win this game. But Michigan was able to come out. They were able to take the early lead. They led for almost the entire game. And Ohio State, what we've seen from this year's team is they're not built to play from behind. They're not built to win that tough kind of game. They're built to go in and overwhelm an opponent. But when that doesn't happen, they ran into some problems. We certainly saw it against Oregon. We saw it against Michigan, and then it leads to 2 losses that ultimately, are going to end up keeping Ohio State from achieving its goals.
And I think Ohio State maybe at times was trying to go too fast. They knew Michigan in the past has struggled against up-tempo, and I think maybe that also contributed to some of those false starts where they were just trying to go a little bit too quick to try and catch Michigan. Instead, they caught themselves off guard on all those false start penalties. So Ohio State, they do fall to Michigan, first time since 2011, and to no surprise, we have seen maybe some pent-up frustration from the Ann Arbor side of this rivalry come spilling out in the last couple of days. I want to get your take on what Jim Harbaugh said after the game. He prefaced it by saying you want to be humble, you want to take the high road, but then he immediately takes the low road and basically accuses Ryan Day of being arrogant, saying some guys are born on third base and think they hit a triple.
Yeah, I think, we've seen a little bit of it from him. I know Josh Gaddis made some comments on Monday saying that Ohio State's not a tough team. I know we saw Aiden Hutchinson after the game. He made the point about them being disrespected. It was clear that he had heard the Hang 100 comments that Ryan Day reportedly made a year ago. And I think that's 2 years of bad blood kind of stewing there for Michigan. I mean, this is a team that was essentially accused of backing out of playing Ohio State last year. That was the accusations that were levied against them, at least from the Ohio State fan base. And so I think Michigan was pissed off about that. And I think they went into Saturday's game really wanting to make a statement, and that's what they did. And so, from my perspective, I think they earned the right to talk a little trash. I mean, this is a team that hasn't won the game in 10 years. And so I think they earned the right to talk a little trash. They earned the right to beat their chests a little bit. That's just the way it goes in a rivalry like this. That said, I don't think those comments are going to be forgotten come next November when Ohio State is hosting Michigan and Columbus.
When Ohio State and Michigan meet in November of 2022, we can be assured it'll be a little bit different coaching staff for Ohio State. I think maybe a month ago there was a thought that perhaps this defensive staff will return intact. I don't know if that's the case anymore. And you look on the offensive side of the ball, certainly Kevin Wilson and Tony Alford's names are being mentioned as perhaps head coaches with some of the openings going on. How do you see the coaching staff changes? And do you think there's going to be a lot of changes on the coaching staff, or is it still just going to be a little bit of a wait and see?
Yeah, I think there are going to be changes on the coaching staff. I think especially on the defensive side of the ball. I think, after suffering, multiple losses in games where their defense really got overwhelmed, I think that Ryan Day has to make some changes there. I think he's probably got to look outside the program for a new defensive coordinator, because I think Matt Barnes did a good job for the most part in terms of getting that defense improved after those first couple of games. But when it came down to the biggest game of the season, they didn't have any answers. And so I do expect that there will be multiple changes on the defensive side of a ball. Who will come in, who will ultimately be let go, that I'm not sure about yet, but I do certainly think that there's going to be some changes there, and probably on both sides of the ball, because like you mentioned, there are, several candidates, guys like Kevin Wilson and Tony Alford, who could potentially go get head coaching jobs elsewhere. And I mean, you just look at the way this coaching carousel's spinning right now. I mean, in the past 2 days, we've seen Lincoln Riley go to USC, Brian Kelly go to LSU. If you had told me that 72 hours ago, I would have been stunned. So anything can happen. You never know where, another coach might get an opportunity. But I do think there's going to be some turnover on this coaching staff. And I think it's really important for Ryan Day to get it right this time, because I think this is a big test for Ryan Day. He came in, brought in Jeff Hafley with him. That proved to be a home run hire, but he was only there for 1 year. In the last 2 years, the defense hasn't been up to par. And so I think that he has to get it right this time. He has to prove that that's something that he can do, and that he can, maybe go outside of his network, maybe outside of people that he already knows, and to go find somebody out there who can get Ohio State's defense back to playing at an elite level.
So we know Ohio State will go bowling. Most likely it's going to be a pretty prominent bowl, Dan. Where do you think Ohio State ends up a little bit over a week? We'll know that destination.
Yeah, I think most likely we're looking at a Rose Bowl berth for Ohio State right now. That's probably going to depend on what happens on Saturday night. If Michigan wins and beats Iowa, then Michigan will certainly be in the college football playoff. And I think that will likely lead to Ohio State going to the Rose Bowl, because the Rose Bowl has it in its contract that if they don't get the Big Ten champion, they're going to take the highest ranked Big Ten team that isn't the champion. And that will very likely be Ohio State. I think if Iowa beats Michigan, that's, where that maybe throws a wrench in that, because then if Michigan remains ahead of Ohio State, Michigan would probably end up going to a college football playoff bowl, as well as Iowa getting in as a Big Ten champion. And so that would likely lead to Ohio State potentially going to the Citrus Bowl. So we'll find out for sure on Sunday, but I think it's most likely going to be either the Rose Bowl if Michigan wins on Saturday, or the Citrus Bowl if Michigan loses.
All right, thank you very much, Dan. Hope strange days indeed, as the Buckeyes need to root for the Wolverines in order to backdoor their way into the Rose Bowl. College football in 2021. Thank you, Dan.
Yep, thank you.